please, first.
My name is Hannes Bergberg. I have a question for George. George Aite, is that how you say your name? Do you believe that the development aid from Norway and other countries are counterproductive rather than doing any help at all?
Maybe we can sum up a couple of questions, but make sure to make a note of it.
My name is Elise. I'm just wondering, what is your stand on the fair trade organization and giving out microloans to individuals? Do you think it helps, or is it not beneficial?
Yeah, it's a question for Mr. Toledo. Thank you for your speech. It's interesting to see how Peru is progressing and actually giving education to most people also in the indigenous highlands. But freedom is also a question about real choices, and you are just in the middle of a big choice between two candidates of the presidential election where you also stand. And I've got two questions for you. You represent some kind of the center of the Peruvian politics, and together with the other candidate, Debatt, you actually had to gather more votes than any of the other two candidates because you didn't cooperate, you were not able to actually any of you get to the second round. And as you possibly know, that the two candidates we got for the second round in Peru is, one is the daughter of the former Fujimori, which was corrupt, and on the other side we got Humala, which is portrayed some kind of a Chavista, Lulista in this latter quotation. My big question to you is then, for which side are you going? I understand you wanted to support Humala and having some kind of cooperation with him in the parliament. Why do you do this? We know that the Sultan was going supporting Keiko Fujimori, and you are going for the other side. Could you give us some insight into this very difficult choice I guess you have?
We will have some answers, and then we will do another couple of rounds with questions.
It's kind of, I think the question was related to whether Norway's aid to Africa has been effective. And I think that there are some things that Norway is doing that are good. I should mention that. And that is, in my country, for example, we have discovered oil, and Norway has been very accommodating in suggesting to us that we set up a heritage fund so that we can put some of the oil revenue into that fund, and so that we don't squander it like the Nigerians did, and oil became a curse in Nigeria. So that's something good, which the Norwegians have been very, very helpful to us. On the other hand, Norway also has many programs, especially in with Uganda, for example. And I mean, Museveni, of Uganda was somebody that I personally supported way back in the 1980s, late 1980s. Now, this was a leader who said, back in 1986, that no African leader should be in power for more than 10 years. Now, he's been there for 25 years. Now, if you were to ask me what I would suggest to the Norwegian government, I would say that, look, it is about time that we change, placing so much faith in the rhetoric of these leaders, and put our faith in the development of institutions. Okay. Now, there are 6 critical institutions that we need in Africa. The first one is an independent and free media. We also need an independent judiciary with the rule of law. We need neutral and professional security forces. Neutral and professional security forces. I mean, how in perdition can you have an African leader using tanks and fighter aircraft jets, fighter jets against its own people. How? That's why we need neutral and professional security forces to protect the people, not the bandits in power. Okay. The fourth institution that we need an efficient civil service. Fifth, we need an efficient and independent electoral commission. Now forget about preaching free and fair elections. You're not going to have free and fair elections if the electoral commissioner is in the pocket, of the rat in power. Okay? And you also need to have an independent central bank. Okay? Now give us Africa, give us these 6 institutions, and we will do the rest. Why? Because reform has to come from within. It has to come from within. Reform cannot be dictated from the outside. It has to come from within. And I think, if Norway were to focus on these institutions, okay, not so much investing in the rhetoric of these leaders, there'll be a lot of change in Africa. Now, forget about adding conditionalities to aid. Because right now, China is all over Africa, okay? And the Chinese have a huge wallet, okay? And they're promising to give aid without any conditionalities at all, okay? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that China is not welcome in Africa. But what they're practicing in Africa is something that I call chopsticks mercantilism. Okay, because look, their rhetoric has been disguised and sugar-coated with this euphonious verbiage about not being a colonialist in Africa. And therefore they are willing to give aid to Africans without any conditionalities at all. But the deals that they are signing in Africa are not transparent, they're opaque. And they are also securing these deals through bribery and corruption by building palaces for the presidents and building soccer stadiums for the rest of the people. This is not fair trade or clean trade. Okay? Norwegians should not compete with the Chinese. What I would suggest that the Norwegian government does is to simply focus on building the institutions that Africans need, Africans to make their own case for reform. Thank you.
Let me understand your question.
Like, what do you think about the fair trade organizations? We know that there's an organization that helps people through like branding the diverse products with fair trade. Do you think that that sort of way of helping people, is it working or not? Because it's sort of like a controversial thing.
I've been the promoter and the pioneer of trying to get a free trade agreement between Peru and the United States. And we open up the market with China. So we sell grapes, mangoes to China. And we open up with all free trade agreements with other nations in the world. I think that free trade makes a lot of sense, open up markets. The free trade is a two-way street. United States cannot say, listen, you have to operate under a free market. You are not allowed to subsidize your agricultural products. But they in turn do subsidize their agricultural products. So we're trying to deal with equal free trade agreements. Secondly, if free trade agreements do not benefit the middle and the small entrepreneurship, then we are really creating internal problems. The generation of jobs comes from the medium and small entrepreneurship. They're not in conflict with the big corporations, but I think that free trade agreements makes a lot of sense, provided They're equal free trade agreements. They are much more horizontal, and that have access to medium and small entrepreneurship. Me, added to what my friend just have said in relation to your question and to your question over there about Peru. Latin America is the most promising continent for the next 10 to 15 years, if we are able to meet some crucial challenges. Let me repeat. I think Latin America, looking at the world, is one of the most promising region in the world in the next 10 or 15 years, provided that we meet some crucial challenges. We are just about to make the jump from being a raw material exported into more aggregate value economy, knowledge economy. Secondly, if we are able to build strong democratic institutions that are accountability. The rule of law. If we deepen on those issues, then the region is ready to operate, particularly in today's world context. Latin America has been able to deal relatively easy with the crisis of 2009. In fact, we got out of that faster than the United States. Europe is still dealing. If Europe is not able to deal with the financial crisis of Greece, Portugal, Spain, then you might have a contagious effect again to the United States. And although President Obama has put in an incredible amount of money recently to deal with the crisis, Latin America has learned a lesson. We're still a long way to go. But if we meet those challenges, particularly those dealing with education and strong democratic institutions with accountability, the region is in a very promising path. Let me answer the question of my friend that apparently has some knowledge about elections in Peru. No. With all due respect, you might have received a wrong piece of information. I do not support Humala. Just as much I do not support the daughter of a dictator who is in jail. I want to be clear about it. I don't know where you got that information that I will support Humala. Unfortunately, Peru is today in a very difficult position to choose within the next month between two candidates that really Peru does not deserve to be put in that position. One is the daughter of a dictatorship that I had the responsibility to lead a coalition to bring him down. And now he's sentenced for human rights violation to 25 years in jail. And the other is a military who has an inclination to follow Hugo Chávez's policies. No. We have put it forward straight. We do not support neither of them. And we are going to be vigilant of the democratic process. And that's the role that as a leader and a former president will continue to do. We do not support Humala. We do not support Keiko Fujimori. I just want to put the facts straightforward.
We have, at least in my eyes, it looks like a row of questions. So if we start here, we'll eventually end up with you, sir.
Yes, I have a question. If you have a situation where you have corrupt leadership, which you have in many states, and you have a country like Norway who likes to do something for these countries, and you will try to do that through investments. So my question is, or I got the thought that if you want to have big investments, then immediately you come over the radar of the corrupt leadership. So if you should choose, given advice, would you rather have many small investments or few big ones?
I have a couple of questions. One for Toledo. You said that, I made a quick Google search for your presidency. One of the first things that comes up is that you reduced extreme poverty, employment grew, and also economic growth. So can you just give some quick examples of your most important political reforms? And also you said that Latin America is the most promising continent for the next 10 to 15 years. I don't mean to sound pessimistic or anything, but it has, in my view, Latin America has been a very promising continent for a long time. It is ruined by extreme populism and corruption by political leaders. So, what makes you think that the next 10-15 years will bring the political reforms that hasn't come before? And then also one question for Aide. Even with the information of non-functioning aid policies, there is huge political gain in Western countries to portray yourself as a nice person that gives a lot of aid. So how could you? I don't think these non-functioning policies will be reduced before you can also gain politically by it. So do you have any ideas for how you could make the views more popular, so it could also be achieved, as kind of nice to reduce non-functioning policies?
Mr. President, you said that you don't support neither of the two candidates in the second round of the presidential election. Your countryman, Mr. Vargas Llosa, said that choosing between the two was like choosing between AIDS and cholera, I believe, and then he ended up choosing one of them, Mr. Kumar. You could be looked upon as the rescuer of Peruvian democracy a decade ago. How do you see that Peruvian democracy will be preserved by the two candidates that are in this second round? Thank you.
Hi, I have a question for Dr. Aide. What would it take to see a new breed of leaders take power in Africa? Do you see any signs of them appearing? And is there anything you would like us in the West to join in to see that happening?
My question goes to George. Your point number 6 about central bank. Do you believe in the monopolization of money, seen in the perspective of the US Fed and the quantitative easing 1 and 2, and maybe more until the dollar soon collapses? Thanks.
Question is, have I missed anyone now, or have we covered the floor? One.
I think both the speakers touched upon the importance of the private sector in contributing towards development. You have any development is good versus sustainable development. And you touched upon the corporate responsibility. I wanted to know whether you think that corporate responsibility in terms of good governance, promoting good labor standards and the environment is something that the market will take care of itself, or does it need intervention from governments, and what do you do when the governments are poor?
Okay, maybe I can even, when I have the microphone, pose one question to President Toledo. It is not only in Peru, but in quite a few Latin American countries that the institution of the president is a very strong man position. It might not always be a man, but still it's a sort of almost a French-style presidency with quite long mandates. For some even it goes beyond. There are those pertaining to be there for a lifetime, especially Hugo Chavez. But other than that, the idea of a very strong presidency might of course look like a very resolute power to sort of make business of politics real. But how much does it actually contribute to the legitimacy of decisions and the anchoring of what is actually decided throughout a presidency and on to the next and on to the next? I believe at least what we have seen in some other countries that have been closer at sustaining that kind of predictability that democracy ought to produce are those who have been able to divide powers more between parliament, presidency. Do you see that as an interesting model to explore for Latin American countries, or do you still believe that the strong presidency is a necessary governance model to get out of gridlocked situations? I think if no one else have questions, then not only answering but also rounding up with your final closing remarks will now be the opportunity. So first, I give the floor now to George, and then, or would you like to do the other way around? No, George first? George first. Since you were the one to be second in the opening, you will be first in the closing.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to respectfully disagree with the President. I think Africa would be the most promising continent. We also face challenges. Maybe 10 years from now, we should all meet and see who won the bet. But anyway, somebody asked about corrupt leadership. It's a very serious problem in Africa. And think of it this way. The World Bank and the African Union itself claims that corruption costs Africa $148 billion a year. $148 billion a year. Now, compare that to the total amount of foreign aid that comes into Africa. That is 30 billion, 30 billion. So, you see, helping Africa is like pouring water into a bowl that leaks, okay? So, you have to determine for yourself whether it makes more sense to pour money into a bowl that leaks, whether you should pour more money into this bowl, whether you should plug the leaks. I personally believe that Africa doesn't need aid. It needs to plug those leaks. And if it plugs those leaks, it will find more aid resources in Africa itself. Now, finally, somebody asked, where do you find new leadership? Okay. Now, there is a huge leadership vacuum in Africa. And if you follow the events in North Africa, okay, now, the leaders, I belong to an internet discussion forum, and I asked them, since 1960, Africa has had 215 heads of state. And then I ask people to name me just 20 good leaders. 20 out of 215. They couldn't come up with 15. Of course, everybody mentioned Nelson Mandela, you can go down the list, you try it yourself, Nelson Mandela, Nyerere, Kwame Nkrumah, etc., etc. A few people get up to 15. Now, if you can't get to 20, okay, then it tells you that if you have less than 20 out of 215 as good leaders, then it means that Africa suffers from monumental or catastrophic leadership failure. That's what our problem is. Now, the youth of Africa lost faith. The current leaders have very little credibility. As a matter of fact, right now, out of the 54 African countries, only 15 of them are democratic that are chosen. The rest of them are just, Now, the leadership has failed. What is the alternative? Unfortunately, in Africa, the alternative is useless. The opposition is fragmented. And also, the opposition is also obsessed with the same personal ambition for power. And this is why in North Africa, the youth of North Africa arose to push both of them aside, both the leadership and the opposition. Now, this youth movement is gathering storm in Africa, and I call them the cheetah generation. The youth are the young, the educated. They're not going to sit there and brook any nonsense about corruption. So that's where Africa's new leaders will come from, the youth movement. I call them the cheetah generation. When you go back, Google the term cheetah generation. Asia has its tigers. Africa will have its cheetahs. Thank you.
Let me, may I understand a little bit of your question?
Well, the question was that if you could choose, I mean, you as a president in Peru, you wanted to attract foreign investment. And, well, it's awkward because if you have a situation where you have a country where you have very corrupt leadership, they understand that they want to have investment. But if you attract big investments, then you get over the radar of the leadership, and then you are open to abuse. So my question was, if you had choice, would you rather have many smaller investments made in your country, so that they are so small that they don't get above the radar, and hopefully over time something could evolve? That was the question.
Thank you very much. No, I don't think they are mutually exclusive. The issue is not to choose big business versus medium or small business. The issue is the diversity of investment of different sizes. Corruption is always a crucial issue. The World Bank has issued a report recently where they have estimated what are the costs of corruption. And it's very high. It's 26% average on the structural costs of production. 26% is the estimated cost of corruption on the average. That is why I was making a reference about the need to have a strong democratic institutions that are accountable, accountability, in order to counter-arrest corruption. Let me respectfully agree with my friend Well, I hope that in 10 or 15 years, both Africa and Latin America will be the promising continents in all the world. This is not a competition. It's a matter of learning mutually. Leaderships. One of the reasons why I said the Latin American is a promising continent for the next 10 to 15 years, the reasons are the following. Number one, we have natural resources in abundance that unfortunately are very high prices in the international market, and therefore leaders find the task of leading a country very easily based on an external factor. And sometimes they become complacent and not investing in human capital. But we have. If we are able to use that income in the minds of our people and transform a continent into more knowledge economy, as it was mentioned, that is one reason that leads me to believe that we can do it. And we're beginning to do it. Number two, in the last 60 years, maybe without knowing or unconsciously, we have created a considerable stock of human capital that is in a diaspora in the world. And if we are intelligent enough to recuperate the human capital that is spread in the world and create a policy that attracts them to come back to the region, now that is much more stable and much more promising, then human capital is a crucial component of that jump of playing an important role in the world economy. It is true that there is a tendency in some countries, that's why talking about Africa in general or Latin America in general, one always runs the risk of making generalizations. But really, Brazil, it's a country that is almost 300 million people. It's big, it's growing, it's part of the BRICS country. It's playing an important role. So is Chile. Peru has been growing at an average of 8% the last 10 years. Hopefully we won't blow it up by this new election that we have in a month. We have learned our lessons in the economy. Almost all of them are growing. There is the risk of some governments who are using democracy to be elected in order to change the rules of the game to stay there for many years. And let me be specific. Venezuela with Chavez, Nicaragua with Daniel Ortega, Bolivia with Morales, Ecuador with Correa. And God illuminates that we find a solution in Peru the next month. My friend, I invite you to Google me and look at the records. When I began my government in 2001, the economy was in recession, and I let the economy growing at 7.5% in 2006. Inflation was 1.5% average in the 5 years. The fiscal deficit, I'm embarrassed, it was 0.6. I invite you to take a look at what the fiscal deficit in the United States is. Yet, we made some progress in poverty reduction, but not enough. We did some social programs, we advanced that. I'm sure it's not enough. It's 5 years term. I'm not gonna go over my own records, that's why I invite you to Google me, and maybe you will have the information. Secondly, I believe in an independent central bank. It's an insurance for populist governments. It's vital for the management of a healthy economy. Sustainable development. Now, I think that it should be part of the rules of the game of investment. We stimulate private investment, but we need to have clear rules of the game in both parts of the table. Complying with certain environmental requirements is part of the rules of the game. We cannot just leave it at today's technologies has been developed and the costs are much cheaper that you cannot contaminate the water of the rivers or deforestate the jungle. So I want a sustainable development. And I want that to be part of the rules of the game. And let me be very clear. I'm an academic, but I have not finished my life yet as a president. So we'll see what happens. Yes, Mario Vargas Llosa has said that in this incredible, insane choices that we had to make on June 5th to choose between HIV and cancer. That's what he put it. Sometimes countries are crazy. My decision is not to support neither government and to be careful, vigilant of democracy. That's what I did 10 years ago, and that's why I'm going to stay in Peru. I want to play the role. We don't want to destroy what we have built in 10 years, growing at an average of 8% in democracy, with its fragilities, with its difficulties. But I'm going to stay there. The presidency. No. We have a Congress, and we have the judicial system, and we have other institutions. Dictatorships is something else. We have a presidential system that is strong, but, for example, in Congress now is very fragmented. Consequently, they have to make some political agreements in the Congress. It is not a system like in Norway or Spain or England. It's not a parliamentary system where you elect a prime minister, you elect a president. Of course, I like the system, but I don't like it when you stay forever. And that's why I fully, publicly and privately disagree with President Hugo Chavez. There are some presidents who are creating a problem in the region by using democracy to be elected and then change the rules of the game in order to be elected 1, 2, 3 or 4 times. And that creates a little bit of noise, and that's what one of the challenges that I mentioned that we have to meet. How do we prevent that? Now let me put that in the context of the world today. Hugo Chavez, that is having an influence in the region, included in Peru, might be hearing the noises of what is happening in the Arab world. Watch it. Egypt. How many years? Libya. Now Morocco. So, I still believe that the Latin America, if we are able to build a strong democratic institutions with accountability, if we are able to recruit the human capital that is in a diaspora in the world, and if we are able to diversify the internal composition of economic growth by giving more aggregate value to our production, hopefully, if we create new leaderships, then we don't have to compete between Latin America and Africa. Thank you very much.